This week I want to talk all about one of my favorite things, bikes. And with the weather getting nice, I want to talk about how to get it ready to ride outdoors because Lord knows we all want to get out of the pain cave and get out on the open pavement. So, a question you might have, but why? Why can't I just pull my bike off the trainer and go ride around? Well, you can, truly, but there's some good reasons to get your bike ready. So let's dive into those. Wear and tear. Things wear out. And as I kind of say down below, indoor season can be really hard on bikes. We sweat all over them, often in a very static pattern, and it can get into things that are meant to spin and move freely and wear them out. So doing some maintenance, some cleaning can go a long way. All that wear and tear can degrade your performance and decrease the efficiency of your energy transfer from your body to the bike to forward motion. And we want as much of that as we can. We want as much speed as we can get. Doing it up front, doing it here on the front end of the season can bring peace of mind for your big training and season ahead. And honestly, it's just nice to start off the season fresh and know that your wearables, your pieces and parts that are going to wear out, are at the beginning of their life, not at the end. So, do you have to? No. But does it put you in a good position for the rest of the season? Absolutely. And that's why I recommend it and why I want to talk a little bit about what to be thinking about, what to do if you're a do-it-yourselfer, and give you at least some sort of a framework to use while you're kind of thinking about this in the next couple weeks. So, like I said, the intention here is to give you a framework to think about the items that you might need to service or repair on your own. Or, if in doubt, if you're not a mechanical person, to make you aware of the things that could break down so that you can be paying attention to how the different parts and pieces are performing and call your local bike shop if you need to. And I want to make a note on this. Like, it is spring, weather gets nice, and everybody is going to be thinking the same thing. They're going to say, I want to get my bike ready. I better go to the bike shop. So I don't want you to walk in there expecting to have your bike done today or tomorrow. It might take a while. Call ahead, get it scheduled. I just talked to one of my friends at a local bike shop, and they're already 4 weeks out with this nice weather. So think ahead, plan ahead, call ahead. You'll be happier. The bike shop owners will be happier. So I like to break this mentally down into kind of two priority levels. Your like level one primary maintenance, which are things that are going to wear out on the regular, season over season, and your secondary, which are going to be less frequent, things that need maintained, but they're there. And then inside of that, I'll talk about another couple ways to come at it to help troubleshoot, or at least kind of a way to think about it so you know what might be going wrong. So, primary maintenance. I'm going to start with some low-hanging fruit here, some things that you should be doing on the regular, not just in spring here, but weekly, monthly at the very least, to keep your bike in good running order. And the first is just a good old cleaning. Once the weather's nice and you can let that thing dry out outside a little bit, get the hose out, put on a nozzle or use your thumb so that it's a gentle stream, and use some gentle soap and get it sudsed up, rinsed off, let it dry out. What we don't want to do is use like a high pressure water and really force some water into the crevices and cracks. That can actually damage bearings and shorten lifespan on some of these parts. So use a gentle flow and a nice non-aggressive soap just to get the dirt and grime off. Second big thing, it's easy, I would say fairly overlooked, is keep your chain lubed. Now, you can use kind of one of two things. You can use a typical lubricant that you can buy at a bike shop or online, or you can go the waxing route. Waxing your chain takes more work up front, but does offer a longer time in between servicing or lubricating, and it also gives you some extra efficiency as well. So if you're in the camp that you would want to put a little bit of effort and time into that, definitely head over to YouTube and look up some videos on how to do that yourself. Otherwise, grab a lube and use it regularly. We're aiming for about every 100 to 200 miles just to stay on top of things. You'll know when your chain is starting to get a little dry because it'll start to sound like a little chirpy bird back there that spins around the gears. And that's when you need lubricant, or it's really past time. So keep a mental tally of about 100 to 200 miles and get some lube on there. Find one you like and just try to make a routine of it. Moving on, let's talk common high wear parts, items that often wear in one season of use. One of the biggies, drivetrain. And by drivetrain, I'm talking about the big chain rings up front attached to your pedals. I'm talking about the chain, and I'm talking about the cassette or the group of gears on the back wheel. These all wear a good bit, but the ones you want to be most mindful of are the chain and the cassette. The chain itself is good for about 1,500 to 2,000 miles. The cassette can get more life than that, but you start playing a game where it can wear out, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. Brake and shift cables, those can wear out. Those do wear out over a season and are worth changing, and they're really cheap, and it's not a terribly hard task to do. So I highly recommend doing that. Hydraulic fluid can get worn out if you're a heavy braker and a hard braker. Tires are good for about 1,500 to 2,000 miles. And then if you're running tubeless tires, the sealant, the fluid in there, does dry out, does not last forever, and you need to change that every 4 to 6 months. So about 2 to 3 times per season. So let's dive in and talk about two questions, two ways of thinking that I like to use as I approach this. So ask yourself, how is it shifting? And you can also ask yourself, how is it braking? And these two questions can give you some really good insight to a lot of the wearables. Not necessarily bottom brackets and headsets, but the items, the high wearables, it's going to give us a really good peek into most of those. So let's move on and kind of take a peek at that. So how is it shifting? You may have great shifting and not have to worry about it too much, but if it's not shifting great, if your bike's jumping and skipping around, it could be cable stretch to blame. It could be you've got dirt and grime down in with the cables and into the housing. That happens. Chain cassette could be worn out, or you could have a bent derailleur hanger. And that basically aligns your derailleur so that it's straight up and down with the gears. And what do you do about that? You adjust for any cable stretch if you have that as the problem. And this is a really simple thing to do once you know how to do it. And I plan to make a video on that before too long so you all can learn how to do it, because it can save you a really simple trip to the bike shop that they're just going to be like, oh, that's easy. So if you know how to do it, it can be really powerful. Now, one thing to note here before I move on is cables by their nature stretch, especially new ones. So when you put new cables in here in the spring, if you do that, expect them to stretch, expect to have to add a little tension to the system within the first week. And then once you get through the first week or two, they settle in and it's a lot less stretch, but they will stretch by the end of the season and into the next year. So you'll always be kind of playing that game if you're still using mechanical shifting. So, like I said, replace any old or worn cables and housing. That's a good task to do yearly. You don't necessarily have to do housing every year, but definitely do cables because they do wear out. Or go electronic if you've got the money, because it's nice to have none of that to deal with if it's in your budget. Replace your chain if that's worn. And this is where I kind of mentioned a worn chain will wear a new cassette. A worn cassette will wear a new chain. They wear each other out and it gets into a cycle, right? So it's good to change them together, but technically speaking, you could change the chain 2, maybe 3 times before changing your cassette, but you're going to play the game of the chain's going to start wearing out more and more quickly as that cassette gets older and older. So best advice is change them together, but you can probably get away with at least 2 if you had to. And then finally, going back to that derailleur hanger, You can align it. It is a job you can do yourself. If you have the tool, it's kind of a specialized tool. Ask me a question about it if you are curious, but it's probably a bike shop job for most. All right, moving on. How is it braking? Are you having any issues there? Again, cable stretch or worn or dirty housing can be to blame. Hydraulic fluid getting old or contaminated, or worn pads or even contaminated pads, pads that have gotten brake fluid on them or some other substance that makes them not grab the rotor as well, or the brake path. That can always cause it too. And again, so same kind of ideas, adjusting for cable stretch. I'll address that in a future video. Replacing cables, bleeding your brakes. Good to do that every year or two at the very least. And then replacing brake pads or rotors as needed can address this. Another high wear item are our tires. So let's talk about them. They are a big deal as they provide us grip and confidence in our handling. So let's talk about what to look for there a little bit. One of the biggies is a flat spot or a flat area all the way around the tire. You'll probably notice on your back tire the most because we distribute more of our weight back. That tire tends to wear a little quicker and get that flat section in the middle more than the front. So going down to that third point, you can kind of rotate your tires front and rear to help avoid this, but you might want to do it mid-year or at least at the end of the season to try to get a little more mileage out of them. I don't know if it helps a whole lot as far as keeping the tires more round and avoiding that flat spot, but it's worth a shot. Also check for any like flat spots by themselves, as if you locked up your brakes and drug them. That can be a sign of wear, or any bulges or tears in the sidewalls. Those are signs that your tire probably needs to be changed very soon. Some brands, these wear marks that I mentioned in the second point, some brands have these built into the tire, and it's basically like a little divot out of there. And once you can no longer see the divot, you've worn through the tread, and it's time to change the tires. It's kind of like how it works on your car if you're familiar with that. Lastly, I like to recommend paying attention to how long your tires are holding air, as it can give you some insight to how either your tubeless setup is running and how that sealant is holding up, or it can even give you insight into how old your tubes are and how well they're doing. You should be getting at least several days, if not weeks, for holding a decent amount of pressure. If you're tubeless and you're dropping pressure in a day or two, you're probably getting close to that 4 to 6 month mark, and you need to get some sealant in there. Tubes can last a while. They really can, but they do get old too. So keep in mind, if you're running tubes and you're starting to see your pressure's not lasting, your tubes might be getting old. All right, so let's get into that secondary maintenance. So this is kind of like what it sounds like. It's not as important, not as high priority, but they are things that do wear out. So these items include brake pads and rotors. They don't wear out every season. They do need to be replaced from time to time, but again, not probably your top of the list item. Same goes for bar tape. It really depends on the person and the wear and how you use it, but often you can get several seasons out of that. Same goes for parts that have bearings in them, like bottom brackets and headsets. These typically will get through a season and do not have to be changed quite as often. But if you're hearing some creaking in your crankset, it might be time. If you're feeling a little wobbly in the steering, it might be time to check out your headset. So, being aware of things not moving quite as well on your bike can be a big deal. Wheels and spokes, they do wear out. Spokes break, but you will usually know that when it happens. We don't usually do preventative maintenance on those so much, but you can kind of go around and ping your spokes and make sure that they feel equal in their tension. But usually after several years, you'll start wearing on those things and they might need a new spoke. So usually that's more catching it after it happens. Chain rings, and when I say chain rings, I mean the ones up front. Those are designed to carry a lot more miles, at least 10,000, if not 20,000 miles. So you do not need to change those nearly as frequently. They do wear out, but not like chains and cassettes. And then finally, derailleurs do break. I actually had one break, and it was a huge surprise. It was my only one in about 2 decades of riding. They do break. So these things, you can look at these, you can kind of pay attention to the parts and see, like, are you getting creaking? Are you getting groaning? Are things not turning? Does your bar tape look like it's falling apart? Do your brake pads look low? You can check all these things, but they aren't necessarily things you have to do every year. And they aren't probably going to be top of your list here as you're looking at, hey, what are my concerns before I go into the training season? So all that being said, I hope I gave you a little bit of a framework for you to kind of look at this and say, hey, what have I done this off season, this winter? Where's my bike at? What might need fixed? What does need fixed? How is it shifting? How is it braking? I hope I've given you a way to think about this so you can know and either call in and get your bike worked on or do it yourself. So let me know what questions you have. More importantly, let's get outside and ride and have fun, and I can't wait to see you out there. Ride on.